Hello and welcome to the Problem Gambling Podcast. I'm Barry Grant, an addiction counsellor with Extern Problem Gambling, and my co-host is Claire Donegan, project lead of the Women's Gambling Support Network, and who's currently doing a master's in addiction counselling and psychotherapy at the moment. And our guest today is Shane O'Connor, a former professional footballer and recovering gambling addict. And yeah, thanks for joining us today, Shane. How are things down in your part of the world?
Yeah, thanks a million for having me, guys. Yeah, fantastic. The sun has beaming down in Cork, as we know, the real capital of Ireland. So it's always great to be down here, but extra great when it's sunny.
Cork people just can't help themselves.
Can't help ourselves. We're the best people in Ireland, so why would we?
There's this weird thing about Cork people that they have so much confidence. I think that, like the mothers down in Cork obviously were just treating you totally different to the mothers of every other county in Ireland.
And look, we're in All Ireland semi-final hurling, All Ireland quarter-final football. I mean, we're on the way back. If we win the bowl of them, sure, you never heard the end of it. We go
Yeah,
back to back like the 1999, you never heard the end of it.
living the dream.
Yeah.
Well, listen, Shane, for people who don't know who you are, do you want to just tell us a bit? Because obviously you started, say, as a professional footballer. You went to Liverpool when you were 16, or what age you
16.
went to Liverpool? Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you want to tell us a bit about how that happened?
Yeah, so I suppose just a quick background on my childhood would have been very much predominantly sport. Hurling would have been actually my main sport, just there was more opportunity in regards to playing GA than there was soccer, particularly in my upbringing. So I was probably going to go down the hurling route. I was playing for Cork, I was doing really well, and the opportunity just arose to go on trial to Liverpool. So I jumped at it, I got the opportunity to go over there, and I suppose any 16-year-old kid, if you're going to ask him, do you want to go to move to England and play professional footballer? I was a huge Manchester United fan growing up. Unfortunately, they didn't ring the phone. It was Liverpool. Apologies for any Liverpool fans. I'm only joking, of course. But I was delighted to move over there. I had quite a lot of options, to be honest, to go on trial before I signed for Liverpool. But because they were the first team to offer me the chance, I decided to go there. I went there for about 3 years. I suppose, as I say, I was predominantly GA growing up. So the gap between myself and lads who had been in full-time training for many years, I suppose it was a bit big for me to try and to bridge, to be honest with you. So I kind of realised early on I probably wasn't going to make the Premier League team, if you would, with Liverpool. So the opportunity after a couple of years arose to me to go and sign for Ipswich in the Championship, which was just the league below. And I felt I was improving. I was getting better each year there, but I wasn't obviously at Liverpool level. So when I moved to Ipswich, I probably felt I was more at home in regards to where my level was, particularly in the reserve team. And I started to kick on fairly quickly. I started to be involved with the first team a lot more, train with them a lot more. And if you train with better players, you actually learn faster and become better yourself. And I suppose that opportunity to train with the first team really brought me along quickly. And I broke into the first team. And obviously, being from Cork and being a huge Manchester United fan, I would have been a huge Roy Keane fan growing up. And as luck would have it, Roy Keane was actually manager of Ipswich at the time. So I was afforded the opportunity to play under my childhood hero. Now there were pros and cons in the experience, but still it was absolutely fantastic to see him on a day-to-day basis, and actually, you could see why he was a proven winner, and maybe that's why he fell short a little bit at Ipswich, because we weren't at that level of, why can't you do this? You think of the reason we're at Ipswich and you were at Manchester United. Not belittling Ipswich at all, it's just where we were at the time. We were mid-level championship team. So I suppose we weren't at the caliber that he would have been used to. So I ended up being there for a few years. And just as I was going into the career trajectory, I'd always been on an upward curve, whether it was with GA growing up, then into soccer. Then I made the move to England. I was then playing first team football, got rewarded with a new contract. I was wearing the number 3 jersey, which a lot of people would think, oh, geez, he's a starter for Ipswich in the Championship. And when Roy got sacked, coupled with an injury for myself, I kind of fell out of the team. And as it would be in England, the conveyor belt is very fast. It ends up going around. And if you're not playing, you'll fall off that. You'll end up going down the pecking order. And that's kind of what happened to me. I ended up falling down the pecking order, not being picked to go for games, not being picked to go in squads. And it ended up leaving me at home on a Saturday afternoon. And I would have been 20 at the time, hadn't turned 21 yet. And I'd never had any sort of relationship with gambling. I would see lads betting on the buses. I would see friends at home putting bets on. But me, myself, I had no interest in gambling. I was really only interested in probably being a professional footballer and trying to get to the highest level I could possibly get to. And as I say, I was probably always on an upward trajectory. But once I stopped being involved in squads and I stopped getting the opportunity to go and go and watch the games live, I started to sit at home on Saturday afternoon and just started to put bets on. And I suppose that's where my gambling journey started then, where I started to probably use the buzz of going out and being playing on a football pitch or being involved in match day squads to now sitting at home in the house. And I suppose that's where the gambling journey would have started for me.
Yeah, and I think that's a common enough one for a lot of professional sports people where, like, even if you're playing regularly, you might have a lot of time on your hands. If you do your training and then once training is finished, you're doing your own thing for the day. And some people will go off and play Xbox or whatever. Different people will do different things, but yeah. And then for the players who aren't playing, you have way more time in your hands. A lot of the time you're living far from home or living in a different country, and you're sitting around twiddling thumbs, scrolling the walls. I mean, would you have had much of a support network there? Like, was the club conscious of the well-being of the players? This kind of time away from home, time alone, the impact that would have on them. Do you think?
No, I mean, that's a fantastic point, actually, about just even the time you had to yourself. Because when I was playing in Championship, particularly, you'd have a game a Tuesday and a Saturday. And a lot of your time would actually base around recovery for the next game. And you come home and go, oh, might get a nap in here because the game might be an even. So even though you might not have had a match day that on a Wednesday or Thursday, you were nearly preparing for the game. When you weren't involved in the first team anymore, it actually did give you more time because weren't focused on, okay, I have a game Saturday, I have another midweek game. I'm not really focused on what's coming up now during the week. I'm just focused on when I started to bet, I was actually using that time. Now, at the start, I actually, when I wasn't betting, there was a lot of golf, there was a lot of PlayStation with the friends, there was a lot of that before I started to isolate myself towards the gambling. But there wasn't a lot of, in regards to gambling harm awareness, it was more or less, don't do this because it's bad. But even back then when I was betting, it was a case of, you could bet on anything. You could bet on football as long as your team weren't directly involved in it. So I was able to go and bet in a Premier League game, League One, League Two, or say a Champions League game. Now, the cup games in England, I couldn't, or my own league, but the opportunity for me to do it was there, where now it obviously is cut off, where you can't bet in any sort of football or have anyone put a bet on a football game at all if you are a professional athlete. So that sort of availability to me was probably something, because obviously I felt I had inside knowledge, because being a professional footballer, I thought, sure, I'm going to know what's going to be. I'm going to know the outcome. So when I started to gamble, I started to think, oh, I had the inside information on winning, basically, because I thought I knew the sport. But the free time was something that definitely contributed to it, because even on a Friday afternoon when I started to gamble, instead of, again, preparing for the game on the Saturday or going on a bus and preparing, I started to find myself starting betting a lot on the Fridays, because now I thought, okay, I have all day Friday, where that would have predominantly been a day to prepare for the game the next day. So not only was being left out with the squads, just being left out with a Saturday or Tuesday night game, it was actually being left out throughout the week, because there was a lot of bits throughout the week I would have used in preparation for the game. And I had a lot of time on my hands. Anyway, as you say, I mean, we were finished training most days at 12:30. So as an Irish guy over in England, my family were living at home. I had no one really living with me. Bar say friends came over and stuff like that. So I had a lot of free time on my hands. And I suppose once the gambling came to the fore, I didn't really know how to deal with that. And that's probably what I suppose, on the gambling spectrum, I went from non-gambling to disorder very quickly, because of the time I had on my hands. I wasn't going working a 12-hour shift or 9-hour shift in a normal job. I was able to sit at home and use my time to bet, really, instead of trying to find a solution or something, or even speak to anyone in regards to what was happening to me. So I suppose I didn't understand it myself at the time.
Yeah, and would there have been a big win earlier on in your gambling or anything that kind of set you up? Because you hear that in a lot of people's stories. They start out gambling, something clicks for them to get a bit. Doesn't have to be a huge amount of money. It can just be significant win. Was there anything like that early on?
I remember winning over the first few weeks. I remember the first bet I put on was £10, and it was like a couple of pound on a different sort of accumulator stuff. I probably didn't really know what I was doing at the time, and both teams' scoring stuff. I wasn't really familiar with it. But I remember the first bet won about £340. I remember thinking, geez, that was easy. And I started to do it for the first 4 or 5 weeks, and I kept winning. I started calling them money making Saturdays for myself, because I kept winning. It wasn't substantial amounts. It was in the couple of hundreds. I don't think I won over 500 for maybe a while, but I just kept winning. I thought, geez, this is very easy. This is very easy. I suppose the most significant one was, I was probably only betting maybe 3 or 4 months. It was definitely early on because I remember distinctly, and it was actually an international break, and Lionel Messi scored in the 90th minute, and it was actually when I put on the bookies. I just put a €5 accumulator on, and Messi scored in the 90th minute. And I didn't actually realise how much it won until I collected at the counter, and it was for about £1,600. And I remember being absolutely elated with it. I remember actually thinking when I took the money from the cashier, I actually felt like I was stealing. I was thinking, how was he giving me back 16? I couldn't believe he was after handing me over this much money from a £5 accumulator bet. So looking back in hindsight, that was probably something that gave me that thrill, because I was so excited to go and get the money. I was thinking, there's no way he's going to hand me over this much money. And when he did, I was thinking, geez, imagine I could do this a couple of times a week. I'm going to be made up. I don't even need to go and play football. I can just do this, because at the time you think it is that easy to win it. Unfortunately for me, it was not.
Yeah, and that's the trajectory for a lot of people. Like there's this theory, the 4 phases of gambling. Maybe I mentioned it before in the podcast. Anyway, it's the winning phase, the first phase where it feels like this is easy and you're having winners. Now they can't all be winners, or it would just be the flukiest thing ever. But you're having some winners, and you're probably not recycling your winnings. So you take out your winnings and you buy a new pair of runners, or you have a night out, or something like it. Then the losing phase, which is where people start putting more time into it because they thought it was easy at the beginning. In the winning phase, they thought, well, if I just do more of it, then I'll win more money. So you put more
Yeah.
time into it, you put more money into it, and then the wheels come off, because like anybody can win an individual bet against the bookies. A single bet, no problem. That can happen any day of the week on any bet. But if you try and do that 100 times in a day, now you're in trouble, and you've handed all whatever edge or luck that you had on the one bet, you're handing it all over to the house or the bookies, because over 100 bets, then they have the edge, right? So you're in the losing phase. Then it's the desperation phase, where now you're in debt, you're chasing losses, you're panicking, you're doing stuff that you wouldn't normally do to get your hands on money to gamble, to get back to even, just to kind of break even from all your gambling losses. And then people often get into the hopeless phase where they think, I'm never getting out of this. I'll never be able to get my way out of this debt. And then some people will have depression, suicidal thoughts, and so on. Just to explain it for the listeners, but is that kind of trajectory ringing any bells for you, Shane?
Oh yeah, certainly. I mean, I feel like I jumped through that spectrum fairly quickly. So I started to chase probably fairly as soon as I moved back home to Ireland. But I remember missing rent over in England. I was probably only gambling 7 or 8 months, and I was using money to try and get out of a hole or that I didn't have. So I was no longer, like, when I won a bet, I remember I might buy a pair of boots. My partner at the time, we might go shopping, or we do something with the money. But that phase probably didn't last a lot for me. I started to use the money again to try and get out of a hole or something I might have fell behind. And then I started to, I suppose, the enjoyment, the fun side of the gambling didn't last very long for me. I started to quickly learn that it probably was, I was more chasing from early on than I was actually living in the fun side, which is really dangerous, because before, when you're in it, it's almost as if you don't believe you're in it. You just think, oh, it's just something normal. And I think that's how it's so dangerous, because you don't understand what you're doing. You think, oh, it's just normal. I'm just down 50 quid, or I'm down 100 quid. I'll just win that 100 quid back and I'll be okay. And I remember actually early on, because I wouldn't have been on great money, particularly when I wasn't playing in the team, I used to actually set money aside each day for my gambling. At the time, I used to go over that. It might be £10 or £20, but I used to set it aside every single day to make sure it was there. And I was even that need to put on a bet, and I felt if I didn't need it, I'd have to go and do it. But then that obviously came into, then I need that 20 quid back for another bet, and this, and then the losing phase, as you call it. Yeah, that was when I think I spent predominantly my 13-year gambling addiction in, to be honest. Unfortunately for me, I didn't spend a lot in the winning phase. I was more or less in the losing phase. But it was the wins. It was the fact that you knew you could do the win. I've turned €3 into €8,000 on a Saturday. But and then once I do it once, I believe I'll do that again. And it's that belief that no matter how much money I have in my hand, I believe I can win a big amount of it. I suppose that was the worst thing to ever happen to me, is have those days where I've had low amounts of money, where it'd be £10 or £15, and turn it into a big amount. Because then, to be honest with you, once I started to win the thousands, I lost all mass in lower amounts, even up to £500. To be honest with you, I would think that's nothing. That's just a bet to try and get me back to the thousands mark, because I know money is relevant to every individual that's betting into what they have. But for me, once I started to see the big amounts of money, I needed to get back and live in that amount of money. The small amount of money didn't really do it for me. So I could throw a £50 bet on 100 to 1 and it would mean nothing to me, because I just thought, oh, that might get me up to £5 or whatever it would be. I needed to get back to that amount as quickly as possible. But unfortunately for me, I was always someone who ended up betting to zero. Once I put on a bet, I couldn't just. You touched on it earlier, where you would say put on one bet a day. The amount of times I sat there and I told myself, there's a football match tonight. I really fancy them. I'm going to just put my money on them, and I'm going to do even money bets for the next few days. But sure, I wouldn't make it to the evening. I wouldn't make it there because I'm after betting on everything throughout the day. And then as the evening would come and the bet I was going to do won, I'm sitting there then annoyed with myself I've lost all my money, and then annoyed that the bet I wanted to do won in the first place. So it's like a double jeopardy. If I just had stuck with my bets, I would have won. So in my head, I'm thinking I actually can do it. I do know what I'm doing. I just need to have a bit of discipline about it, you know?
Fair. Any thoughts there? I think a few bells are being rung at it.
So many thoughts. That was easy. How many times have we heard that one? Yeah, that's so interesting, Shane. I was actually taking some notes there as you were speaking, and I think it's a very good point about where was the support for you as a professional if this is a very known thing to happen in downtime. You know, like that there should have been something in place. I find it really interesting that, because I always talk to clients and I'm always talking about how, you know, gamblers are very resourceful people, and if we used our powers for good, we could be so successful and brilliant. Professional footballers clearly have like a very positive mindset and, you know, are very disciplined, as you've mentioned, but unfortunately that can be a really bad thing when you're a gambling addict, because you've got that evidence of the wins, you've got that positive thing, I've done this before, I can do it again, you know. So you've got it all in there, and it's just like listening to my own brain, you know, what you're describing there. So it's really interesting.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, there's another thing with sports people. Like, I mean, work with a lot of people who play sports at a high level, like mostly amateur in Ireland. And you have to be good at that level. You have to have this kind of winning mindset, this kind of never say die. Like, even when you're getting absolutely hammered at half time, you need to be able to come out for the second half and just, go again and believe in your ability to win the game. Do all this sort of stuff, which is great. It's perfect out on a pitch. You know what I mean? You need that. You have to have it on the pitch. And, talked about Roy Keane. It's that kind of winning mentality, that kind of never say die mentality, that a lot of people admire them so much for. But if you take that mentality into a betting shop, you're doomed, right? You are doomed. It's like your Scunthorpe United taking on Pep Guardiola's Barcelona. Do you know what I mean? Like, you haven't a hope. There's zero chance, right? There's only going to be one winner eventually, right? Again, you can have an individual bet that's going to win. You can go on a run, like you said, €3 to £8 whatever it might be. Then that's usually the worst thing that can happen to a person, because you're creating this really unhelpful, toxic evidence that's going to sit in the background all the time when you're down to your last tenner and you need, put fuel in the car or buy food or whatever it might be. You're going, well, hang on, remember that time I turned it cheap? Why would I buy food for the tenner or put fuel in the car? That would be mad. Yeah. So you're creating all that, but that kind of never say die, kind of really disciplined, winning, focused mindset, which a lot of really successful sport people have, is a disaster in a gambling environment. Or would you disagree with me on that one?
Yeah, no, you're spot on, because I felt it's one of them things that you're describing. I always want to be the best at everything I've done, and I think somehow I took that into gambling without realizing it. I substituted. I wasn't playing football, so now I was like, I'm going to win as much possible as I humanly possibly can, and it never really got to that stage for me. But I always felt like that I could always win. Like, the next bet I could always win. And it gave me that opportunity to, okay, I'll win the next one. I'll win the next one, and then you go on a winning, like the winning phase, say that you would go on. and you feel untouchable. You feel like you could put no foot wrong. You'd be putting on stuff just for the sake of it, and it's winning. You're like, I could win it all day here. And what's actually funny about the winning phase is that when I was winning bets easily, I wasn't getting any enjoyment out of them. So say, for example, put a tennis bet on and I needed him to win a set. And if he won that set pretty handily, I'd be nearly annoyed that I got no kick out of I got no sweat on. I wanted that kind of jeopardy where it was going to lose. Or like, that's why the 90-minute winners in football give you that elation, because you think it's not coming in, all of a sudden it wins. So it's nearly, you're betting for nearly the near miss. So, and it's probably the actual ones that lose, that just lose, are the ones that keep you coming back. Because when you just lose, you think, oh, I was so close there to that. And I was so close to a lot of bets that would have won me a lot of money. Oh my God, if I just won that. And then that nearly hooks you again. So it was nearly the losses that kept me coming back rather than the wins, funnily enough, because I felt like there were so many bets that I left on the table by just missing out on that would have, I would have been, oh, geez, if that won, if that nearly won. And I think that's when it nearly kept me back as much as the winning. So, and again, it was that when I lost, I was like, oh no, next time I'll win. And I did believe every time I would win. And you're right with the mentality. I always felt that, I was 100% into it. And unfortunately for me, I was 100% into gambling. Although if you asked me, I wouldn't have believed I had a problem. I could have stopped at any moment. It was just I had 7 or 8 holes dug, and I was just trying to fill them up before I could stop. But I did actually fill up the holes once or twice, and I could have walked away. But then there was always something else. It was like, oh, I'll just get this. And I remember one time I was like, oh, I'll just get enough for a new car. And after me having, then all of a sudden, I'm right back into where I started again. So it was that mentality was actually the thing that worked against me in the end, to be honest with you. You're correct.
Yeah, and look, you don't have to be a kind of elite level or professional level sports person to have that mentality. Because there's millions and millions of people around the world who thought, again, because they have that unhelpful evidence from the previous big wins, that they go, it can just be as simple as, well, I did it before, so I can do it again. There you go. And technically, that's possible. It's possible. And like you're saying, the dream of most people is not to get rich. Once you're into the losing phase, the dream is just to break even. But then, like you said, I've worked with a lot of people who got to break even, or even who got into a profit, who did not walk away. Because that's the second part of the dream. I break even, then I walk right up into the sunset and I never gamble again. Right? As long as I can break even, that's the second part of the dream. But then, on the odd occasion, it's rare enough if somebody completes the first part of the dream, they break even or they go into profit. Almost nobody, well, actually nobody that I've ever met does the second part, because now you're on this roll and you're going, so why do they quit now? I'm beating the bookies. I'm living the real dream, which is beat the bookies, make loads of money, then I'll ride off into the sunset. Or maybe I'll just keep beating them forever. But I'll crack the code somehow and I figured out the right way to do it, and I've learned from all my previous mistakes.
I think we need to also look at how dangerous that I need to break even is. That consumed my life for years. And just that one thought, I need to break even. You know what I mean? And kept the harmful behaviors and all of that stuff there. It's a really dangerous mindset to be in, because the truth is you don't, like, even if you break even, you don't walk away. I don't know anyone who does, but yeah, I think it needs to be thought about a little bit more. Because when you were saying it there, I was like, I spent years in that phase, just that phase. I was going to ask what you thought you were getting from the gambling chain, but I'm guessing thrill seeking was a huge part of it from what you've described.
Yeah, and I think it was probably substituting the failed footballer persona I was after giving myself. I thought it was letting me escape, because when I came back home and you bump into anyone, they'd always say that, like you were Shane the footballer. And it was very hard to escape that tag. I was no longer Shane the footballer. I didn't even, from a young age, probably since I could walk, all I ever wanted to be was a professional footballer. But once I started gambling, I moved back home. Gambling was my number one, and football was basically my number two. I used fake injuries so I could gamble more instead of going to matches and training, because gambling had consumed me so much. So I think and then the escapism, it took me away from having to probably own the fact that life hadn't worked out the way I wanted it to, and gambling was enabling me to probably hide away from that fact, which I struggled with for a lot of years, right up until probably the last couple of years. I never really wanted to admit that fact, because my mum always would say something to me when I was younger. And she said it once I was in addiction. She said to me that you always had quite strong willpower. If you just didn't want to do something, you could just she couldn't understand how I could just click my fingers and okay, I'm not doing that. But with gambling, it was just something I couldn't do. I had no willpower. I had no power over it, and I refuse to admit that was the case. I believe that I could stop when I wanted, like that's stuff about saying breaking even. I believe once I broke even, I would stop. But the fact is, I was only using the break even as probably a thought process to hide all the facts. Everything I was doing that was wrong. I was saying, oh, if I break even, I won't do this anymore. But in fact, that never really was the case.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's people often talk about lying in addiction, especially gambling addiction. There's a huge amount of lying and secrecy that goes on. But ultimately, the most dangerous lies are the ones that we tell to ourselves. I swear. We're telling ourselves, oh yeah, when I get when, because it's not if, it's when,
Yeah.
then I'll cash out, pay off all my debts, right off into the sunset, never darkens the road of the bookies again, which is bullshit, unfortunately. Like that, in the lived experience of the millions and millions of people around the world who've tried to do that, and there's much smaller percentage of people who've actually managed to break even at somewhere along the line. Nobody does it, right? It just doesn't happen. I haven't come across the person who's done it yet. I've met a lot of people who tried to do it. Right? I have a lot of people who tried, and that's trying to get out of your own head and take a step back and realize that you've been lying to yourself, and that lie you've been telling yourself has been driving this thing for years and years and years is a difficult thing to do. So, okay, I mean, you finished up with Ipswich, and then you came back to Ireland and you played for quite a few clubs in the League of Ireland.
Yeah, but well, to be honest, because I was so troublesome and not performing on the pitch, I was actually moving from team to team. I played for Cork City, Shamrock Rovers, Waterford, Longford, Cobh Ramblers, Limerick, and I only played for about 5 or 6 years. So that'll show you how much I moved rapidly between each team. Yeah, as I said, once I came back off the ferry in 2012, I was a full-time gambler, part-time footballer, and every club I went to, they were signing me on the back of what I might do, but I was never really present at any football club, and they understood that nearly as soon as I was in the door. They were like, "Oh, Jesus, fella, is not what we were paying the money for." And then the gambling started to take off for me. I was a year back home. I wasn't playing anymore, and when I stopped playing in 2013 for a year or so, the persona of me being a ashamed footballer. My mom said, "Why don't you go sign on the social welfare?" I said, "I'm not doing that because that's embarrassing." So instead of signing on the social welfare and having no source of income, what I started to do was actually steal from my home. I started to steal out my mom's purse. I started to steal from around the house. I stole my sister's iPad, sold it down in the game shop. And I mean, even what you think, when I look back, I think like I was too proud to go and sign the social welfare to get money, but I was fine to go and steal from around my parents' house. You know, that was more, at least no one else would have known I was doing that. I was protecting my own image in a sense, but obviously that would have quickly caused a lot of tension back home, and I ended up taking an opportunity to go up north, play up north for a few months, which wasn't great. The standard was really poor. I wasn't going to help the standard in any way, but it was quite poor. And that was where I kind of reached a crossroads. And when I had the opportunity to go to Derry, I went over there, didn't do well in a couple of days training. So he said, "Look, we don't want to sign you." So I had £1,500 in my back pocket. I thought, where am I going to go here? I had no family. I was cutting contact really with all my friends. I went back to a hotel in the north and thought, geez, what am I going to do? I started living kind of day to day until I came to actually a point where I was down about probably £400 in the hotel. And they were kind of looking for their money, and I had £500 left. And I said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put all the money on this match tonight. If it wins, I'll go again tomorrow. I'll pay off the hotel, and I'll go again tomorrow. If it loses, I made a decision. Look, I'm going to take my own life because I can't live this life anymore. I'm basically, what am I doing? So the game happened. It was a Monday night football. It was Chelsea against Man City. I put all my money on Man City. They were playing at home, so I would have doubled my 500 to 1,000. Unfortunately for me, the game ended 1-0 to Chelsea. Jose Mourinho team probably sums my luck up going against the Jose Mourinho team. I should have known better with that inside information. But look, they ended up losing. I remember I had 39 tablets in a wash bag. I took one after the other with a bottle of water. I actually wrote a suicide note to my mom, my ex-girlfriend at the time first. And I took all the tablets, and I remember taking them all thinking, okay, I'll go to sleep and then that'll be it. I woke up in the middle of the night, this horrible pain in my stomach, and I ended up throwing up. And I remember thinking to myself, oh, it's working. Went back to sleep, and I woke up again. the next morning. I couldn't believe. I remember, I'll never shake that feeling of waking up the next day and being so annoyed I was still alive. And I remember saying to myself, I can't even do this properly. That's how annoyed I was. I couldn't even do that side properly. And I remember sitting up the north and thinking, geez, like, what am I going to do now? And there was only two places I could think to sit. It was either in a church or a bookies where I wouldn't have to pay any money. So I went and sat in a church up north, and I basically got onto my mum, who I had had contact for a while, and I said, can I please come home? And she said, yeah, I could come down the road to Cork. I ended up getting a girl that I knew up there gave me money to get back down to Cork, and I came back down. And she came down on the basis that I would, hand over my money. I'd go to counselling, I'd go to the Gamblers Anonymous. And I said, yeah, what all them things. But sure, being a compulsive gambler, I'm a compulsive liar, and the most, I could lie my way out of any situation. And 3 weeks later, I manipulate my mum until she doesn't need to control my money that I was getting in after a while from social welfare. That the counts in GA is not working for me. They're all after losing houses and families, and that doesn't relate to me. I'm only after losing my own money. What harm have I done to anyone? I couldn't see the same problem. And then with the one-to-one counselling, I think the person was probably trying to tell me stuff that I didn't want to hear because I wasn't ready to give up gambling. So that person was nearly striking a nerve in a wrong sense. Instead of me being open to what they were saying, I was kind of, I suppose, deflecting it back onto them, saying, no, you're saying stuff here. It doesn't describe me. So at that point, you would think I would have learned my lesson. I'm after losing my career. I've tried to take my own life. But to be honest, it was nearly only the start of a journey that became a lot more harmful to me, to be honest with you. And that was only in January 2014. So I'd actually only been home 2 years, and all that stuff actually had happened. I'd only been gambling 3 years from start to trying to take my own life. Like,
yeah, and that's a dark place to get to when you're hearing parallels with Tony's Riley's story. For anybody who knows Tony's story, being in a hotel room up north on your own and having suicidal thoughts, and well, in your case, you did attempt suicide. Just to let anyone know who's listening, if you are having any suicidal thoughts, you can contact Samaritan. It's 24/7 on 116 123, or if you're listening in the south of Ireland, Pieta House 1-800 247 247. So yeah, look, that is a dark place to get to. And yet it wasn't your rock bottom, because you continued gambling after that. I mean, when did you get to your rock bottom moment, or did you have further rock bottom moments after?
So from right up to about 2016, I suppose my gambling was only ever harming myself, that I believe, maybe my parents, but I was on my own. It was only in 2016 I met Holly. Holly had Lily before I met her, and then we had another daughter, Eva, and twins, Harry and Sadie. And I suppose once I was then responsible for bills for the people, and I was responsible for putting food on the table and clothes and all these different aspects that a disordered gambler I can't provide for myself, never mind 4 or 5 other mouths, as it would have went on throughout the years. I started to then start to go into debt in regards to, okay, now I owe a couple months of rent. Now I remember the electricity, I think, was 400 or 500 in arrears. There was, I remember, air cut off the telly a couple of times, and you're trying to ring them to get it back. And there was a lot of other stresses that started to come on board onto my shoulders. So I started to struggle with that a lot. And then that's when I started to use a lot of my money for gambling. Then I was using savings that Holly was building up. I was taking money out of her savings account. I was then obviously that would teeter into me when them avenues occur, because obviously you'll get found out with lies at different stages of gambling, but you'll only ever admit to the lie that you're currently caught out to, because there's probably 6 or 7 other things going on. But the one you're caught out to, you'll face up to. You go, oh yeah, but maybe you'll help me out of this problem, but I have to keep gambling because I have to fix all these ones before I can stop. So Holly would have caught me stealing, and then she would have said, okay, you can hand over control of the money. I'd be having arguments with my parents. So then I'd start to try and tap up friends. Then I would use all my friends up, and they'd stop talking to me because I'd either disappear, or I wouldn't give them the money back, or I'd be telling lies all the time. And then once all them avenues are gone from friends and family, I'm thinking, where am I going to get my money now? So then I was in a job. I started to take money from a job, and I'm trying to, and then I'm thinking, geez, what am I going to do now? Because I was taking money from a job, and I ended up basically coming clean in the job, saying I can't do this anymore, because this is. I remember waking up in puddles of sweat every night. I was I couldn't take any holidays. I was so stressed that someone would come in and find out. Actually, again, maybe similar to Tony's story, where he didn't want to take holidays either, because you're so afraid that that one time you're off, that one person will come in the door. In my case, it could have been any number of people that came in the door, and would have just created a bit of uncertainty around a certain, receipt or something. I'd be like, I can't have that. So you're nearly, they probably think you're a great worker, when actually, in fact, you're only there because you don't want to be caught out. So eventually, when that door closed on me again, then I started to go, okay, can I borrow money off people? If I just met you on the street, I'd be asking people for money. It could be like a friend I would have hadn't spoken to in 15 years. I exhausted every single avenue. And it goes back to Claire's point earlier, where she was like, we would exhaust every avenue. We would problem solve anything to get money for the gambling. And it ended up taking me probably to 2024, which was my rock bottom. I remember Easter Sunday, Holly found a lot of stuff on my phone in regards to gambling, lies, all this stuff. And I remember I had to just leave the house. And at the time, it was just really Holly knew about my gambling, no one else knew. But when she found all the information, friends started to find out. She told her parents, people I'd been lying to had known what I was actually doing. They followed the full extent. So I kind of felt alone. I felt like, oh my God, I'm in trouble here. And once I was out of the family house, it was the fact that I thought, all I had really was my kids and my partner, and I thought I'd always have them. But once that had been taken away, and I remember I was living in a house, a chap had let me stay there for a couple of weeks, and I remember sitting in the house, and the silence was deafening for me. I remember crying in the house every day, because there was no noise. I mean, to come into this house anytime, you'll just hear noise and rackets and kids fighting. It's just one of them. It's a nice sound, But and then over there, I remember the silence really disturbed me. I thought, is this what I'm after doing to my life? And I remember thinking that it was the only other time I actually thought. I drove down to Kinsale and I had 2 bottles of wine. I thought, I'm going to drink these and throw myself into the river. And I sobbed into my phone. I was sobbing into the phone. I was looking at the pictures of my kids. And I love my girls. The 3 girls I have, I love them with all my heart. But there was a picture of Harry, and he was 2 at the time. I remember looking at Harry, and I thought, I can't do it with him, because my birth dad would have left when I was probably about 3 or 4 years of age. And I remember, I think when I went into treatment, subsequently, they spoke a lot about feeling like I wasn't enough, that I was never enough. And that feeling of loss gambling was giving me was like replacing something in me instead of maybe a void. But that was their theory. And I remember I didn't want Harry to grow up with that feeling of never being enough, because I knew I did feel that. I knew I felt I wasn't enough. And I thought, I can't do the same thing to Harry as I felt. And that I just thought, I have to be better. I have to do better for Harry. And everyone else as well, for myself. But I thought, I don't want him growing up with the same thoughts that I had. And that was really my rock bottom. That was my moment of I have to try and get better. Because even when I'd left the house, I was still gambling. I actually remember even gambling, because it was a week later when I stopped gambling. I remember it was about 3 days into when I left the house, and I was sitting inside a hotel where I got a couple of nights' money to stay there. And I got up to a couple of €1,000. And I remember distinctly sitting in the hotel room going, I can just win enough money to buy a house. In my head, I thought I could win 200,000 or 300,000 to buy a house, so I wouldn't have to go home. That was my thought process. That's how deluded I was at the time, that I thought, okay, I have 2,000, I'll win enough money to buy a house here. I don't need anyone else. Because my addiction had me alone. My addiction actually had me exactly where it wanted me, away from everyone, away from family. Although I would have been a distant dad and partner, I wasn't present, but at least I was there. Where now my addiction had me completely to itself. I was away from everyone. There was no one ever going to bother me, and I was able to do it all the time. So when I saw that photo of Harry, I knew something had to change, and I reached out to a couple of Tabor Lodge and Sport and Chance in the UK. Sport and Chance, I'd have to wait 6 months to go into treatment. 6 weeks, because of the way they do their people to sign in there. So Tabor Lodge were only a week, and I said, sure, I'll end up convincing myself that I don't need help if I wait for Sport and Chance. So I took the opportunity to go into Tabor Lodge, and look, it was probably the most, I think there's pros and cons to my experience in there. But I think for what I needed at the time, it was definitely something that helped me. I learned a lot in there in regards to myself. I thought I was going to be fixed. I went into treatment thinking, I'm going to be fixed there and I'm going to come out and understand what I was doing. I actually probably believed that I would be able to still gamble when I came out, but just in a way I'd understand it. I didn't ever think I'd never gamble again. I thought I'd come out and be like, I could put on a bet and walk away kind of thing. At the time when I'm in there, they're thinking, like, you're never going to be able to gamble again. I'm thinking, sure, like, what am I going to do then? I don't know what else to do. So it was a big learning experience for me. I probably a lot of back and forth with the counsellors, because I had to sit with myself a lot. And sure, like any gambler or an addict doesn't like sitting with themselves, because they're sitting with their head, and you want to escape that, don't you? So yeah, I think, to be honest, to go back to answer your question, it was the kids and it was Holly, to be honest with you. I mean, I to this day, I still don't, speak to my parents, which is something that's still very tough, which are consequences of my actions. My siblings I don't speak to because of consequences of my actions, because I was able to go away and work on myself, and although I'm over 2 years in recovery, they don't see that side, and I was constantly telling lies. So why would now be any different to what I was before? Just because I could work on myself, they've still had to live their life day to day, and they don't see any difference. So it's difficult. But well, Holly was the only one that saw any good in me. She was the only one that, I suppose, saw good in me when I didn't see any good in me. She thought there is a good person in there. And, I'm really thankful that she gave me the opportunity to come home after treatment, and then also show her that there was a life in recovery. And I'm, without her, I'm not sure I'd be sat here today, because if I had gone outside and we go back to the support network when I left England, if I didn't have the support network of Holly when I came out of treatment, I'm not sure where I would have been. If I had gone and lived in a bedsit somewhere, how strong would I have been mentally to be able to stay on the right track? If I wasn't able to lean on her and be able to lean on my kids, I probably would have sat in a room and gone, oh, okay, what's this for? Then what am I doing it for? Would I have had the same mentality? Luckily, I don't have to answer that question. I was able to come out and live my life in recovery, to be honest with you. And, I say this all the time, and like, my worst day in recovery is still better than my best day in addiction. And it's really is true to that. And I get to go around now and talk about gambling harm. And I think that's it's nearly like a reward for being in recovery and for everything I went through. I believe I was strong enough to go through it, so that now I can try and help others get through their gambling, basically.
Yeah, there's that great quote that I'm gonna mangle, but I remember Tony sending me years ago about, people walking through hell, carrying a bucket of water for the next person, or so that other people don't have to walk through hell.
Yeah.
I've mangled it, but it's out there somewhere. Google it. It makes sense when you see the right one. But yeah, like that, for a lot of people, the rock bottom is you get kicked out of the family home, and then it's just you there with your thoughts. I spoke about that kind of core phases of gambling, but a simpler one is the three phases of any addiction, where it's fun, and you touched on this early on, fun, then it's fun with consequences, then it's just consequences. At some point, the consequences are going to kick in, right? Because the people around you will just reach a breaking point, and they go, "Check this for again, it's all good. I'm done." Off you go, out of the house.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, men in particular, who contact our helpline, that's when they're doing it, is when they're out of the house and they're in the car and they're doing some bed sitter, so couch surfing or whatever it is. And they're going, what the hell am I doing with my life? Like, what are my priorities here? Am I going to prioritize chasing losses for the rest of my days? Or am I going to prioritize my family and the kids and my mental health and all these other really important things? Yeah, so, and like, I know you're talking about pros and cons of residential there, but I suppose the big upside of going for residential treatment, like Tabor Lodge, where you went on before, is you have this circuit breaker where there's no real opportunity to do the thing that you're addicted to. So at Tabor, there would, like all the treatment centers, it would be mixed. So there'd be people in there with alcohol addiction, gambling addiction, drug addiction, and so on. And it just cuts off all avenues, and you're in this weird, not weird, but unusual environment where there's no access to the thing that you're addicted to. Right? So that's hugely beneficial, right? You just get the circuit breaker and it's like, okay, right, now I get to think. Now that sounds a lot more pleasant. I'm sure it is for most people, but
Yeah.
it's important. You have that downtime. You're not working, you're not doing your normal things. There's no access to the thing that you're addicted to. There's a lot of time to reflect. Most of the residential services would put a lot of focus onto journaling and time of reflecting on what you were doing and what before and what you want to look like afterwards and all these sort of things. So that is big. And yeah, you touched on that you're doing talks there as well, which you started fairly recently. So do you want to tell us a little bit about that? You're doing talks in League of Ireland clubs and other places.
Yeah, so it came about through the FAI last year. They came on board. They just about gambling harm. I suppose the way it's gone now, they were trying to get a bit more information to lads. And I suppose because I was played in the League of Ireland, they put me forward for one of the projects that they were going to do. And I get to go around now basically into League of Ireland clubs. I get to speak about gambling harm and just tell my story. There's a bit of educational side. I actually find the gambling spectrum part actually quite interesting, like just exploring your relationship with gambling, understand where you sit. I suppose you can use that for anything really. It doesn't have to be gambling. It could be any sort of anything at all in life really. And I find that very interesting. And the feedback I actually got, when I was in Waterford, I've had moms text me with like really nice stuff that kids have gone home and said and spoken about. I was up doing another one last week up the country, and I got really nice feedback. And I suppose it's more the fact that you actually think, oh, these kids are taking it in, because a lot of them are 17, 18-year-olds. We do first team lads as well. We do the under 20, so it's basically the underage league of Ireland and senior teams, men's and women. Because again, we go back to the education side earlier, that there is help out there. So any of these kids now that do see it, there is help out there. They have my information. They have the actually externs information on the board. They have a lot of opportunity where they think, oh, if something is becoming harmful, there are somewhere to go. When I was 21, 22, I didn't know where I was going to go. I didn't think I had anywhere to go, to tell you the truth. So it is about just giving the lads education, and also hoping, because again, if someone's addicted, I can't. They have to come to the conclusion themselves that they don't want to do it anymore, because no matter what I say or do isn't going to change that for them. But what I would like to think is that by me going around to the clubs here, and also I'm going to get the opportunity to go to the Premier League clubs and EFL clubs, is where I'll be able to speak to them, and they'll think, oh, maybe I see a sign here, or maybe I see a sign in a family member, or maybe I'm starting to go down that road. And they might be able to think, okay, what is my relationship with it? What am I thinking? And if I go into a room of 100 people and one person even takes that thought process, they don't have to act on anything, but they take that thought process, then I think that's a win for me. I think that's a huge win. So if I can go into a room and just have one person think, okay, I think a little differently about my relationship with gambling now, or I'm after learning a little bit, then that's a huge win for me. Because would I have listened if a fella came in and spoke to me when I was addicted? Probably not, because I wouldn't have liked to have heard what he was saying. But maybe I would have thought, okay, maybe he's talking sense. But maybe it would have caught me early enough then. By the time I was 28, 29, I was too far gone. I was on, if professional help was the only thing ever going to help me then. And that's even if that would help me. But they've given the opportunity to go around and do the talks. And I actually done a corporate event last week, which was great as well. Completely different environment. Sometimes it's almost as if I'm kind of like, are these people really listening to my story? It's mad. I remember Tony had said something before where, something good will come of it. And I do believe something good is coming of my gambling addiction by me going around speaking about gambling harm. And I truly do believe that. I always come back to that, because, I feel I'm blessed to be in a position, and I don't take it for granted to be able to do that. And people will always come up to me and always say to me, like, how did you just stop gambling? Like, you couldn't have just stopped. And I always kind of have a chuckle. I go, I didn't just stop. It took nearly 14 years of my life. I didn't just turn around one day and go, that's enough for me. But I said, I'm so fascinated with the why I was the way I was, why I was so consumed for so long. And actually, I signed up for that course in ICAS, the level 8, the addiction studies and psychotherapy, also because I'm so fascinated with the psychology behind it and learning why. And I'd love to help more people down the line. And I believe my why is helping people, and hopefully that. And even when people reach out to me online and stuff, I get to speak about it, and that reminds me of, geez, I never want to be back in that position. I never want to be the one reaching out again, asking for help. And as bad as that is for the person at the time going through it, it's a constant reminder of me, of the life I've left behind, and the life I'm one better away from going back to again if I ever choose to go down that road.
Yeah, and that's like, a lot of people get that from going to meetings, and to see the newcomers coming in the door whose lives are in chaos, and they're kind of going, okay, well, nobody's getting any enjoyment from anybody else's suffering, but it is that reminder of, oh my God, I don't want to go back there. I don't want to go back to that chaos and that pain and that suffering. But that's great, yeah, that you're starting the degree in, because that's ICAS is where I did my degree, and where Claire is currently doing her master's as well. So that's great that you're going to be starting there. Wasn't September, October,
Yeah. I think September. Yeah.
I mean, Claire, any last thoughts or questions before we finish up for today? I know, Shane, we could do like a 3-hour episode.
Yeah, apologies. I
So
tried
much
to keep it
say.
down.
No, that's a
I
good.
tried to keep it down. I was warned at the start. I was warned.
That's a good thing because yeah, you're so engaging and you have a lot of stories to tell, and yeah, I'm sure the listeners would love to hear them.
I
But
think that it could be a 3-part series, to be honest, in that now, Shane. But no, just from your story, I think like what stood out to me and from my own story is the motivation of the kids. Like I've often said, I think if I hadn't had my kids, I don't think I would have ever got anywhere with the recovery. So they really are, motivating and special. The other thing, just on the self-reflection, how you found that so challenging when, you went at the first time. This is important for a lot of people. You went because you were forced to go to counselling, and it did nothing for you because you weren't where you needed to be, and that's the truth. You have to be in the right place mentally yourself. Someone cannot force you, even though they mean well. It's not going to work. But fair play on the everything you're doing at the moment. Jesus, that's a lot, especially 2 years into recovery, and you seem like you're going like very well with the talks and everything. And fair play to you taking on the ICAS course as well.
Yeah,
it's it's rewarding and challenging.
yeah. I've been told. Yeah, hopefully I'll be okay.
You'll be fine. You'll do great.
brilliant. All right. Well, listen, Shane, thanks a million for coming on today. And if anybody's, can people, you're not much of a social media head, or do you do much on social media?
I have it. I have Instagram. I have TikTok and stuff. And that's where people actually reach out to me. I wouldn't be great for posting, but I people reach out to me and I message back away. But I wouldn't be great at it. I wouldn't be one of them people. Unfortunately, my partner keeps telling me, Holly keeps telling me to up my game, but unfortunately, my game is not good enough for it.
I don't do it either.
Better off. You're better off.
I've tried, but it's not for me.
If you want to have a look for Shane online, he's on some of the different social media platforms.
Yeah.
Shane, thanks a million for coming on today and for sharing your story with the listeners. And hopefully we'll all talk again soon in the not too distant future.
Thank you so
Thanks
much.
for tuning in today, listeners, and we'll see you again next time.